Welcome back everyone. I finally managed to find some time for a new video, and since Innistratus has come out a few weeks ago, I might as well build around one of the new commanders. It was a really hard choice from this set, not because there's so many new legendaries to pick from, but because none of them really were particularly interesting to me. We have a new werewolf commander who might kind of help the tribe be more playable now, and a new curses commander, but they kind of all build themselves, and that's not really what I like to do when brewing. So I wanted a challenge. In the end, after trying out a few, and yes, you did almost get the zombie turtle, I settled on Dennick Pious Apprentice because he does something I've wanted a commander to do for a while: investigating deaths. Now I always thought this idea would make a good mono-white commander, but I guess it also makes sense for it to be blue-white, and that does make the deck building so much easier. So who is Dennick and what does he do? Dennick is a 2/3 human soldier for white-blue with lifelink that reads, cards in graveyards can't be the target of spells and abilities. But he also has Disturb, so once he ends up in the graveyard, you can replay him for 2 and a blue, and you now get a 3/2 Spirit Soldier with Flying that reads, whenever one or more creature cards are put into the graveyard from anywhere, investigate. This ability only triggers once per turn. Along with the standard Disturb text, if Dennick would be put into a graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. Now, Dennick isn't the only new commander from this set that has this investigate ability. The other is Eloise Nephalia Sleuth, who is a stronger commander by far. The biggest difference is that Dennick can only trigger once per turn, while Eloise can trigger for every single death, which is quite powerful and can let you do some crazy combos. But White has a lot more investigate in it, so I feel if we're going to do an investigate deck, Dennick is actually the better choice. And that's what I want to do with this deck: make lots of clues and use them in different ways to win the game. So let's get started. First up, let's investigate. We have Thraben Inspector, Daring Sleuth, Erdwall Illuminator, Bygone Bishop, Drownyard Explorers, Magnifying Glass, Tamiyo's Journal, Fleeting Memories, Thorough Investigation, Trail of Evidence, and Search the Premises. Is this every card that investigates in these colours? Not quite, but it's pretty close. Fleeting Memories is particularly good with Dennick, as Dennick will trigger even if the creature is milled by this ability, potentially allowing us to sack a clue and get another one back straight away. Thorough Investigation gives us some extra upside to cracking clues, and Tamiyo's Journal lets us turn those clues into tutors if we get enough. Obviously, we also have our commander alongside all these, but having a good density outside of him is important for a deck like this. Since we want to make all these clues, we also want cards that have synergies with them. For that, we have Academy Manufacturer to make treasures and food along with our clues, Darksteel Juggernaut to get really big if we have lots of clues out on the field, Inspiring Sanctuary to turn them into mana rocks, and All That Glitters and Nettle Cyst to buff our creatures by the amount of clues we have. Sadly, there's currently no way to make clues cheaper to activate, but if that is ever printed, we should absolutely include it in this deck. Now, just making clues is fun and all, but it's not actually going to win us the game very often. It requires us to get a lot of pieces into play, and that can be hard with all the board wipe flying around. So this deck has a side of Reanimator built in to make sure we can keep our important cards in play. And this is basically your standard white Reanimator package: Karmic Guide, Revelark, Sun Titan, Amiria Shepherd, and Restoration Specialist, with Fanatical Devotion and Martyr's Causes as our sacrifice outlets. These sack outlets also allow us to get Dennick into the graveyard, since people aren't just going to kill him once they know what we want to do with him. But I hear you ask, Dennick stops these from working. They're a complete non-bow with the deck. And I'd agree, but we are rarely going to keep his front side in play for very long, and as long as we have sack outlets out, we can choose when we need to stop using his front side. These cards basically let us get back all our best investigate cards, along with providing some extra value and some alternate win conditions. And on that topic, let's talk about how we're going to win. The most obvious win condition is amassing 8 clue tokens with mechanized production and winning in our upkeep. I'd argue this is the most thematic way for the deck to win, as it's like solving the murder case by collecting enough clues. The transform side of Dennick also has flying, which is a great way to get commander damage in with All That Glitters, Nettle Cyst, and Black Blade Reforged. With a couple of clues and mana rocks out, it can quickly get Dennick up to 2 or 3 hit range with commander damage. We can also put these on the front face of Dennick to gain back some life with his lifelink ability as well. Our Reanimator package also provides some combo wins for the deck. I've deliberately powered down the combos in this deck so we don't just have an altar that directly wins us the game. The main 2 loops we can use with our sack outlets are Karmic Guide and Revelark, and Angel of Glory Rise and Fiend Hunter. In the case of Karmic Guide and Revelark, we can bring back one of our low-powered creatures, and with the Angel and Fiend Hunter, we can bring back all the humans each loop. Therefore, I've carefully curated the utility creatures in the deck so as many of them as possible can work in both combos. With Overwhelmed Apprentice, we can do Infinite Mill, Thraben Inspector and Drownyard Explorers can get us infinite clues, Solemn Simulacrum and Cloud Blazer can draw us extra cards, Charming Prince can scry, gain life, or blink something else, and if we happen to have Academy Manufacturer out, these clue generators can also give us infinite mana and life as well. So while we could win with this infinite, it can also be just done for value as well. Another combo in the deck is with a Sack Outlet, a Myria Shepherd, and Solemn Simulacrum. With these out, you can pull every basic plains out of the deck and put it into play, using Myria Shepherd's trigger to bring back the creature each time. It's a silly white ramp combo that I just love to include in decks like this, since who expects you to be able to ramp in these colours? Our last way to win is to turn all our clues into 4/4 creatures with an overloaded Rise and Shine, allowing us to build a big board state out of nowhere if we've saved up enough clues. It may not be an overrun, but having a pile of 4/4s suddenly appear out of nothing is a way to win the game. So we've been over the more unique parts of the deck, but there is one more category I noticed when playtesting this deck. Keeping Dennick alive in his transformed state is rather difficult, and it's really hard to get him back out again if he happens to end up back in the command zone. Which he will, since if he dies while transformed, he becomes exiled. So we need some unique ways to protect him. For that, we have some phasing cards. This includes Vanishing, which lets us pay blue to phase out the creature it's on, Reality Ribble to do some targeted phasing, and Robe of Stars, which lets us pay 1 and a white to phase out the attached creature. Since this uses phasing, our commander comes back in his transformed state, unlike if we tried to blink him, which would bring him back in his untransformed state. Onto the more generic parts of the deck, let's look at the ramp. First we have Sol Ring, Wayfarer's Bauble, Arcane Signet, Azorius Signet, Dowsing Dagger, Sword of the Animist, Magnifying Glass, Solemn Simulacrum, and Myriad Landscape. Since we have such a low cost commander at 2 mana, running an equipment ramp like Dowsing Dagger and Sword of the Animist is a great way to get a lot more value than normal ramp. I've recently really come around to playing low cost commanders just for this sort of ramp, because most people take a few turns to build out their board, and you can get some early value in with these sort of ramp pieces. Up next we have our draw spells, and for that we have Compulsive Research, Concentrate, Reverse Engineer, Sphinx's Revelation, Cloud Blazer, and Teferi's Ageless Insight. Obviously we also have all the clues we're going to make as well, which should allow us to keep our hands full throughout the game. Teferi's Insight is also particularly good here, as it will let us draw 2 cards with every clue, which is a pretty nice rate for the mana we're spending. Moving on to removal, we have a Swords to Plowshares, Angelic Ascension, Arcane Denial, Generous Gift, Crash Contraband, and Cavalier of Dawn for our targeted removal, and Cleansing Nova, Rout, Time Wipe, Austere Command, and Undo Inversion for our board wipes. We're pretty heavy on interaction in this deck, mainly because we need time to build up our collection of clues, and to avoid being killed during the mid-game. For graveyard removal, we have the always reliable Soul Guide Lantern and Scavenger Grounds to provide us with what we need. Not to mention Sun Titan can bring both back in the late game if we need to reuse them. Next up is Tutors. We have Open the Armory to get either our equipment or auras, along with Tribute Mage and Trinket Mage to search up our utility artifacts or equipment. Most of our artifacts are in the 1 and 2 mana slots, so between these 3 cards we can get almost anything we need at that time, be it damage, ramp, or protection. We then also have Tamiyo's Journal to tutor up any card, provided we have managed to get enough clues to activate it. Now before we get to the mana base, there's a couple of cards that didn't really fit into any of these categories. These are Memory Erosion and Overwhelmed Apprentice for some mill, which are great enablers for Dennick to get some triggers off of, and while I originally had some more cards that milled opponents, these were the only ones that ended up making the cut. We aren't a dedicated mill deck, but having a couple of really efficient effects isn't too bad for this deck. We also have a Strionic Resonator to copy Dennick's ability or other Investigate triggers. Paying an extra 2 mana for a clue might be a bit expensive, but I think it's worth a try. And onto our land base, we have Command Tower, Nimbus Mage, and Prairie Stream for our dual lands, and Buried Ruin, High Market, Myriad Landscape, Reliquary Tower, Rogue's Passage, Scavenger Grounds, and Undo Inversion for our utility lands. Then we have 15 plains and 10 islands for our basic lands. So how does it play? Well, it's not a powerhouse deck like Cody or Volo, but it can absolutely hold its own. I definitely wouldn't expect you to be seen as much of a threat at the table, since you'll be mainly holding up interaction and cracking clues at the end of your turn. If you can get one of the ramp equipment out on Dennick early, you might get a sizable mana lead, and if there's a graveyard deck at the table, keeping the front phase of Dennick up can force removal on him. Like a lot of blue-white decks, it plays into control, only for you to suddenly have an explosive turn late in the game when you've assembled enough combo pieces or to do big damage with your commander. In terms of power, I would rate this deck about a 6 on the power rating scales. It's not going to win quickly, but it'll hold its own, and if your opponents aren't paying attention or holding up interaction, it could pull a win out of nowhere. This is one of my favourite playstyles in Commanders. It promotes longer games and high interaction, letting people play out their decks, but including an I win button if it does go on too long. But what didn't make the cut? Well, not much this time. Fateful Absence and Declaration in Stone are thematic slam dunks for this deck, but didn't quite make the cut due to their slightly inflated costs right now. Definitely worth considering if you want to shove in some extra flavour, however, simply take out some of the targeted removal and replace it. The combos could have been made much stronger as well. Add in some of the altars for infinite mana and mill, along with a bunch of the blue artifact tutors to find them, and you would have a very strong combo deck. It does take the deck in a slightly different direction, however, so I don't know how well it fits Dennick's theme, but it would be how I continue to power up this deck if I needed to fight at higher power pods. Blue-white Reanimator is a threat that people need to deal with. I've also included a human theme in this deck that could be further expanded, maybe running the Thalias or Mother of Runes and the Soul Sisters and such. We earned the right colours for it, but the best humans were simply too expensive for a budget deck like this. I think if you pulled out the Reanimator sub-theme and put into more tribal cards, Dennick could do a pretty cool human investigate thing. Lastly, if you want to take Dennick in a more mill direction, that also seems quite viable. His front face could stop your opponents from getting as much value out of your milling, and you'd simply switch in cards like Psychic Corrosion, Mindcrank, and Maddening Cacophony to make it work. You're in decent colours for it as well, just remember to run some Graveyard Exile alongside it. And that's the video for today. I hope you've enjoyed this look at a blue-white Investigate deck, and who knows, maybe we'll see more commanders in this space soon. It seems to be something they're giving more and more support to now, so here's hoping the next one is just as interesting. In unrelated channel news, we're both pretty hammered at work at the moment, but I will continue to try and get a video up with each new set. I've got several other deck techs half started that I wanted to put out in the slower months, but finding time is half the battle. We also recently broke through 100 subs back in August, and our Cody deck tech has broken 4,000 views, so thanks for everyone who's actually sticking around and watching these. I'm not too fussed about the views we get, but it's always good to know when people are enjoying what we're putting out. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.